Welcome to tonight's JPAC meeting, October 1st, 2020. Thanks for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Chad Barnhart. I serve as Assistant Dean of Students at Ohio University and Chair of the Joint Police Advisory Council. So we're happy to have you with us this evening. Our agenda for this evening, the first order of agenda is our continuing standing agenda item of ongoing conversations about police training and selection. So I don't know if there are questions from the committee related to that, or if there's any input from either of the chiefs, either Chief Pyle or Chief Powers, about continued police training and selection.
I know that there was a meeting today about the training that we've been collaborating with the county, the city, us, OU, and the Voinovich School have been collaborating on the de-escalation training. Kind of, I guess that's probably the best way to describe it, de-escalation training. And the feedback I heard was that it's going very well. They're very excited about it. And it looks like there may even be some federal funding eventually to support rolling out on a broader scale. So sounds like it's well on track.
On a broader scale, when you say on a broader scale, Chief, what do you mean by that?
So the original funding that came through the Voinovich School was primarily to try and develop training for police departments in rural Appalachia. But with an eye to potentially rolling it out statewide, if it kind of using Southeast Ohio as proof of concept, sort of, for the effectiveness of the training. But with everything that's going on currently on a national level, there's some potential funding streams that could support rolling it out even more broadly than just Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Chief Pyle, anything to add about continued police training and selection?
Nothing in particular. That was what I was going to brief everybody on, was that ongoing project there. I just reached out to Tia Jamison to provide some, I guess you'd call it stakeholder input for one of the scenarios. Tia is part of the Bobcats LEAD program. I think that's her program she spearheaded, and she's more than willing to provide input into the training scenarios from her perspectives. And she was seeking out volunteers from Bobcats LEAD as well to provide their input and critique of the scenarios. So I'm glad we got that. I don't know if Peter's on with us, but he might have heard from her. I'm not sure who she intended to ask, but that's pretty much where we are.
Great.
Does anybody have a link that they could text to Josh Thomas, or to text to me, or if they don't have Josh's phone number, he's not able to find a link to get logged in, and I was having trouble getting logged in too. So
let me see if I can find a link. And
Scott, are you still listening in? Could you email that to Josh?
This is Ryan here.
Hey, Ryan, sorry.
It's okay. I'm not sure if Scott is there, but what I do know is that I can access the account to send out an email to anyone that needs it. Were they already invited, or do I need to have their email address?
Josh should have been previously invited.
Okay, Josh, I'll take a look at it right now and I'll send that.
Thank you.
Josh Thomas.
Any other questions? Any questions about police training and selection? Okay. we'll move on to the second agenda item, which is COVID public health enforcement. And so this topic was suggested in terms of police response, both on campus and off campus, related to OUPD and APD's response to parties, to individuals that have COVID who may be participating in off-campus activities, and are approached, and citations and warnings. That's pretty broad, sweeping. I don't know that I can get any broader about that. But if there's any input or any questions related to the enforcement related to COVID and the interaction with the police, perhaps it would be helpful to hear from the chiefs about their approach when they are addressing parties or individuals related to not wearing a mask.
I'm happy to dive into it a little bit. I want to be careful about what we say on here, because some of it could be operational in nature, and since this is a public meeting, I want to try to avoid discussing operations. There are several different enforcement opportunities that I think it's safe to say both agencies are learning as we go, and both agencies are we're trying to be more communicative and educational rather than heavy-handed in an enforcement way. And that's with everybody, not just students. Ire from the community seems to be pointed at the students, not necessarily at others. But, we had I guess you'd call him somebody that was significantly politically right in a confrontation at a local store. Well, I guess I shouldn't comment about their political bent, but it's, the person was an anti-masker and went to the store to create a problem. Our officers were very, very patient with that individual. We're very, very patient with the students. And even though there are a lot of folks that would really like us to see us issue citations and whatnot, but I think the officers in the field, the practitioners, are reluctant to hang a second-degree misdemeanor on people when it's a violation that is just a technical violation. And I'll give you the reasons why. Demo derby at the fairgrounds, 1,000 people, almost no masks. Tractor pull the weekend before. A political protest at the courthouse steps or something along those lines. And then, and we're very patient with those things, and we don't enforce, do a lot of enforcement with those things because they're protected or they're special circumstances. But then we'll get a call from somebody in the community about 11, 12, 13 kids in the front yard drinking beer, where a year ago, we would have been very happy that it was only 12 or 13 young people in the front yard drinking. Now, in the face of COVID, it's a major issue. And I think our officers, they take all that into consideration, and they're like, look, if I can just ask you to break this up and remind you that this is a technical violation, and people are wildly cooperative, they have a hard time bringing themselves to cite that person with a second-degree misdemeanor. And by and large, 90%, I'd say, of the calls that we get are just like that. Mm-hmm. I also think there's some misunderstandings about what we can and can't do and what we should and shouldn't do. For instance, in a large apartment complex, there are open spaces, and let's say there are 12 apartments inside that surround a courtyard. If there are 30 total kids in the courtyard, but they're in groups of 5 over here, and then 15, 20 feet away, there's a group of 6, and so on. We get complaints about that being in violation of mass gathering, and that's not the spirit of the law, in my opinion. And so our officers will walk right past that and go to the one apartment where there's 12 or 13 or 14 or 15 kids and tell them to break up, because that would be a violation. But they're telling them to break it up, and they're saying, don't do this in the future, rather than arresting somebody or citing them. Mm-hmm. And so I'm comfortable. I've talked with my officers and my staff and my leadership. I've also talked with the mayor and people in the community. And I'm pretty comfortable with where we are. And I know there are people in the community that want us to do more, but this is also new. I think being patient with people and trying to be educational in the long run is what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. So that's where I am.
Thanks, Chief. Any questions for the chief?
I have one. Go ahead.
Okay. My only question, I'm sorry, I was a couple minutes late there having technical difficulties today. Was just, the only times that I hear about it right now in the Uptown area is the Friday and Saturday night that I hear people say, there's all these kids outside of the bars, they're in line, they're not wearing masks. And I'm just, my curiosity is, to you, Chief Pyle, is there, I've often wondered, like in my shoes, I'm like, if I was an officer, maybe I'd just stroll down the street and, I don't need to write out citations, but if I just walk by everybody and said, hey, let's all make sure we're masking up while we're out here, let's stay within the spirit of what we're trying to do here in town. Is that something the officers have done or willing to do? Literally just putting it in the kid's brain sometimes is really all you have to do. And then before you know it, they're like, oh, okay. And they do that,
Yeah. The issue really is that the mask ordinance was designed to be complaint enforced only. And so, the officers might walk down the street and say, hey, there's a mask ordinance on, but that's where the conversation ends. They don't try not to debate the people. And now, if we got a complaint, we could go to those folks and say, you have to put a mask on. The problem is that we don't get the complaints on the masks. We haven't had a complaint on masks in over 2 weeks. Now, what does happen, and I think what gets the community stirred up, and I just mean the community at large, and gets them looking at us like, what are you doing, APD, is that the complaints don't come to us, but they get logged onto social media, and it's like Sunday afternoon, people will post a picture, look what I saw last night, and then the people that are disturbed by that kind of get their ire up and their comments back and forth, and then on Monday, it gets to City Hall or the police department, and people say, why aren't you doing anything? And we're kind of like, well, why didn't somebody call in a complaint? If you took a picture Saturday night, why didn't you just call the police department and lodge a complaint? And we would have went up there and addressed it, So that happens a lot, and it's kind of frustrating, to be quite honest, and perfectly candid about it. So we've been asking folks, please file a complaint. The officers have been walking foot. ODH, investigative unit, formerly known as liquor control, they're aware of what's going on. They've cited some of the bars for inside violations, but outside, that's kind of like a different jurisdiction for them, and I wouldn't expect them to enforce that. And I'll tell you, the few times we have gotten complaints, there's 12 people out in front of J Bar or whatever. By the time we get up there, that crowd's gone. And there might be 2 people there and both are in masks. And so, we couldn't do anything then, even if we wanted to. So it's tough. It's a new thing. We've only been enforcing this for about 2 months, mask ordinance, I think, since end of July. So August, September. And the Department of Health orders, I think that there's a reluctance there because it's such a hefty violation. It's second-degree misdemeanor. And the officers are kind of looking at that going, for having a friend over to your house, I'm not sure I want to do that to somebody, So it's rare that an officer is reluctant like that to enforce the law, but it is happening, quite candidly speaking.
I think it's, just from my perspective, I wouldn't ever propose that they would be walking down the street handing out citations. I don't think you get anywhere with that. But again,
Right.
just the comments that I've heard back and forth is they'll say, I'll hear somebody say, well, there was a whole group outside this bar. They weren't masked. They're all clumped together. You know, we see APD just roll by and not say a word. And I understand it's complaint driven, but just a little proactive, just a roll down the window of, hey guys, have a good night, but let's make sure we're doing the masking thing. You know, we're all in this together, just something along those lines. I just think that goes a long way. And I don't know if that's something your officers are interested in doing, or if they're eager to do that, if they're reluctant to do that. I understand they don't want to get into an argument with somebody about masking and stuff, but if we have an ordinance that says if you're standing in a big group and you're not wearing a mask, then you should put one on, you know? That's just a thought. And that's just something I've heard in the Uptown area, you know?
Yeah, I think that they do it when they're given an opportunity. It's not a great icebreaker, you know.
No, I'm sure. Yeah.
But it you know, I've had conversations with them. I know that they are doing that. But you're right. You know, there might be a large group of people out in front of the bar and the officers are driving by. I know they might be driving by because they're going to another call. They might be driving by because they're going to, go stop a car, or they just might be driving by because they're headed over to a different part of town to patrol. I mean, there's, hard to say. But I don't think they're ignoring the mask ordinance, and our log activity would be an exhibit to the contrary of that. I mean, they're very proactively going out and looking for violations of the Department of Health orders. When they're encountering that, they're also talking to people about the mask ordinance. When they get complaints about mask ordinance, they're also talking to people about ODH orders and things like that. There's just not been a lot of official enforcement as far as citations and arrests and things like that. And we do have a rare occasion. We had an instance very recently where a female who was COVID positive and popped up on the state computer as such, basically was falsified information to the officers and said that she wasn't. And in fact, she was. And so our staff are investigating that and will probably formally charge her. That's a totally different situation, and that rarely happens.
Thanks. Sarah, you had a comment to make.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. I just wanted to bring up a couple of things. And one is that, like, under the city ordinance, the mask violation is an administrative violation. So, that's not a second-degree misdemeanor. It's an administrative fine. And so I think that that if officers are reluctant to cite people because of it being a second degree misdemeanor, they could be cited under the city ordinance. But also that while yes, it's complaint driven, I don't think that there's nothing in the ordinance that precludes the type of activity that Josh was describing, sort of. And I think that would go a long way towards, I guess, the public's confidence that that our law enforcement does take these seriously. But I definitely understand, because when I see people in a store that are not masked or are masked incorrectly, like with their noses hanging out, it's I don't relish the idea of saying anything to them. I'd rather avoid the confrontation. But I did want to.
Interestingly enough, that's actually an easier enforcement issue, because the store calls us and the store trespasses the individual. So now there is a criminal law violation and a mask ordinance violation. So that's a much easier enforcement. And you might have seen something very similar in Logan recently, hit the national news and or even the global news, where the officer in Logan arrested the woman at the football game. Whether you agree with that or not, the officer was well within their legal right to arrest that person, because the school official who was standing right next to the officer had trespassed the woman and asked her to leave the property. And so the officer in that instance is completely empowered to do so. And so in a private business and in a restaurant, in a retail store, that's a much easier enforcement issue than encountering people. It's unfortunate, but yes, it's an administrative violation. It does carry a pretty hefty fine. But even if we cite somebody, we still can't enforce the ordinance. We can't make them put a mask on. If we walk up to every person in the city and say, you don't have a mask on, here's your $100 ticket, they still don't have to put a mask on. We have no way to force them to put a mask on. And so we walk up to people with a box of masks and say, there's a mask ordinance, here's a mask. Would you please put this on? They can say no. And our only option is to write them a $100 ticket. If they walk away, we've instructed our officers not to stop them, because I don't want officers using force to stop somebody on a citation. And I talked it over with the prosecutor, and we didn't feel comfortable with a resisting arrest or an obstructing charge on an administrative violation like this. I mean, if push came to shove, we could probably do that, but I don't know that that's the kind of front page news we want in the city of Athens, when we could be more, communicative and educational and get the compliance that we want. So that's at least where we're starting,
Thanks, Chief. Chief Powers, anything to add or any general comments or other questions?
I don't really have anything to add.
Any other questions related to this topic?
I would just add, if we have concerns about like the bars and whether they're enforcing the orders that they are supposed to be enforcing, to make complaints to the Ohio Investigative Unit, because if they have a complaint, they're required to follow up on it. And they're trying to enforce these orders at like 17 different counties at once. So that means they're not in Athens every single weekend. So if things are happening, unless there's a complaint, they don't know about it. So I would just encourage you. And that's, on the business owners. And I mean, they might cite individuals as well, but that's them going in and trying to encourage the businesses to be doing what they need to be doing as well.
Yeah, I agree, Kim. I mean, and you would know that, of course. I've said it all along, and I probably differ from a lot of folks, but I just don't think we're going to prosecute our way into mask compliance and gathering compliance. There needs to be, I'm harking back to the days of the riots during the fests, and I said, as long as 5,000 students are getting together and drinking beer late into the morning, that's not going to end well. And I don't care what kind of resources we throw at it. And I kind of feel the same way. As long as there is this dissension politically across, masks and their value and whether one should wear it or not, and the whole question of constitutionality of the Department of Health orders and all of these things, as long as that's out there and people have opinions on it, law enforcement trying to enforce and prosecute compliance, it's tantamount to trying to police the fests at 3 a.m. And I think we've got to have a culture shifter. We've got to have, we've got to get people to do this voluntarily. I mean, Andrew Powers and I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, and he gave me the analogy of, we all know that the speed limit on a certain street is X. Most people drive 5, 6, 10 miles an hour over. You put a police officer down there, and everybody will go the speed limit. But as soon as that police officer's gone, everybody's back to 10 mile an hour over, because that's traffic normalization. And I think that's the same thing. Yeah, we have been putting officers on the street and talking to people. And it's a lot of people, when they see officers coming, they'll put a mask on. As soon as that officer's gone, they take it off. I see it all the time, every day uptown. People will put a mask on to go in and get a cup of coffee. As soon as they hit the bricks, the mask comes off. And I just honestly feel like we're just not going to be able to prosecute our way through this. We're going to have to do everything we can to have a culture shift, and to get people to want to put it on.
Any other comments or topics related to this particular agenda item? Okay. Our third agenda item was just general discussion. If there are topics that people want to bring forward or discussion items, now is the time. Going once, going twice. Okay. And then if we just want to go around the room with folks, I'm going to start in the my left-hand corner. If people have any items in terms of a roundtable or any announcements they want to make, now's the time to do it. Peter, you're in my upper left-hand corner. You have anything?
I don't have anything really, but with Bobcat's lead change, just to update you guys, I'm part of the as Officer Powell was saying, Tia also, Miss Tia, she's part of the group, but we're starting a Bill of Rights. So basically there's 5 components: campus life, administration and faculty, university legacy, support services. And basically we'll just be examining the campus and try to find things that we can improve out of Ohio University. So for example, University Legacy is trying to find buildings named after potential racist or slave owners and like that. So that's what we're working towards. It's not really a discussion topic, but just to let you guys know what's going on with that.
Peter, can you say the 5 topics again that you're addressing? University legacy.
University legacy, support services, academics and faculty, that all falls into one. And then there's, how many did I say that? Is that 4?
I have legacy, support services, academics, faculty.
Yeah, and then administration and student services.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sarah Grace, you're next. You have anything? Okay. Chief Powers, anything that you'd like to mention or address?
Nope, I have nothing.
Okay. Kim Castor and your dog, anything that you need to address?
No, this is Roscoe telling me it's dinner time. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh, anything?
I don't have that much other than just we're looking forward to, October rolling around. We do anticipate that, even though there are not official homecoming things going on in town, we're anticipating it uptown that we're still going to see a homecoming crowd. So that's something for everybody to kind of think about, that next weekend, the 10th and the 11th, if you're rolling around town on Saturday, you're probably going to see a lot of people. That's just what we're hearing. So we're preparing for it. I think most other places are too. I know I've even had this conversation with the bars that I think they're preparing to handle whatever comes in town as best as they can too. They don't want to have a huge problem, and neither do we or anybody. So, but it's something to think about next weekend. If you're out rolling around, you see a large crowd, be ready for it. So,
Thanks, Josh. Chief Pyle, anything for the good of the order?
Maybe next meeting.
Okay.
Maybe next meeting.
Thank you. Allie, you're next on my list. Anything?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. The second Kim Castor, which might be Cassie, anything for the good of the order?
Nope, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Emily, anything for the good of the order?
She's too busy messaging me saying, why is there 5 Kim Castors on this meeting? She didn't realize her name was showing up as Kim Castor.
That's okay.
My apologies. I thought there was another Emily. I thought you were going to say Kim Castor 3.
Kim Castor 3, do you have anything for the good of the order? Okay. Mary Catherine reports nothing at this time. Toby, anything?
Excuse me. I got this kind of cryptic email about the pedestrian passageway.
Mm-hmm.
And it said that it's still closed to pedestrians. It didn't say anything about vehicles. Is it now open?
The roadway is not open, Toby. But the passageway has been open for several weeks to pedestrians. Everybody should try to, if you're down in that area, take a trip down there when it gets darker. The lighting is amazing. It's actually really well done, and I think once it's all completed, paved, and landscaped, it's going to be a landmark for the university and the city. It's really impressive. But the passageway is essentially fenced off. They might be closed down a portion of it here and there just to do some follow-up work, but pretty much pedestrians can go underneath through the passageway and have been able to for a couple weeks. They're hoping, and the newest update on paved, shrubbery in, landscaping done, the whole 9 yards is October 17th. So that's just 2 short weeks away. And you're going to see a rapid amount of work in the next 14 days. I think they're actually bringing in the pavers next week. Doesn't look like it's ready to be paved, but they're really close. So,
okay. I think this email that I got was talking about the sidewalks. So I think they mean the sidewalks on the side of Richland are still closed. So that makes sense.
Yeah, that is true because they're still forming and pouring railing up to the Oxbow Bridge. So,
okay,
they'll be closed for probably a week and a half, I'd guess.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
In that vein, Chad, I can share that the 56 bridge is about to open up, I think tomorrow, unless it gets delayed for some reason, and I've not heard that yet. But the bridge out on State Route 56 that's been closed all summer should be opened up tomorrow.
Yep. Thanks, Tom. I heard that earlier today. That's great. That wraps up our meeting, unless anyone has any last final thoughts. Our next meeting will be Thursday, November 5th at 5 p.m. In the meantime, I would encourage everyone, if you haven't already registered to vote, please do that, and please vote in the coming election. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.